decrees and proclamations, dictates and reprieves. Those at the top and in a position of power and authority release these to the masses as a means of not only informing the people of what is going on, but to also flex their power and authority, even if it's just to look good in the eyes of their friends. But with the releasing of these statements, there are times when additional information is needed. That's why addendums exist and get put out regarding these matters, so that people can be better informed on what exactly is being said. Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming, Dune Imperium. With this episode, we will be going over some information that we pulled from across the different rulebooks for the game, but we weren't able to incorporate elsewhere within this series. First, we'll be taking a look at the icon guide and any additional terms. With Acquire Icon, it is found upon some cards that possess a special Acquire box, which is found underneath their given cost. The player will gain the effect only once, which is obtained when the player acquires the card, not when the player plays the card from their hand. With the Acquire a Fold Space card icon, it allows the player to obtain a Fold Space card from the reserve. With the Acquire Tech icon, it allows the player to acquire one of the face-up tech tiles found atop of any of the stacks found upon the X board. From there, the player is to pay the spice cost, put the tech tile into their given supply, and then reveal the next tech tile found in the given stack. The negative numbers connected with the Acquire Tech icons indicates that the player gets a tech discount of either 1 or 2 spice based upon the negative number connected with the tech icon. With Agent icon, it is in reference to the third agent that is available in the Swordmaster space, which was placed next to the board during setup and that the player is able to obtain and use for the rest of the game. With the Alliance icon, the player can only use this effect when they obtain the Alliance token that is associated with the faction that is shown. With the battle icons, they're special icons found on conflict cards, and once a player wins a conflict and puts its associated card into their given supply, said player is to see if they have another face-up card that has the same battle icon on it. If so, then the player is to flick the matching pair of cards face down and gaining 1 victory point in doing so. During the end game, the player is able to match the wild battle icon with any of the 3 battle icons found in their supply. From there, flip this matching pair face down in order to gain 1 victory point. With the combat icon, it allows the player to deploy troops into the conflict found for this given turn, as though they have sent their agent to that of a combat board space. With the contract icon, if playing without the Choam module, the player is to gain 2 Solari. But if playing with the Choam module, the player is to take the face-up contract unless there are no more contract left, causing the player to gain 2 Solari. With the control icon, if the player wins a conflict that is connected with a control reward, said player is to place their control marker upon the flag area found below that space, replacing any opponent's marker that just so happened to be there. If a conflict card is revealed for a space that a player already controls, then the player is able to deploy 1 troop found in their supply into the given conflict. With the discard icon, it allows the player to discard a card of their choice from their hand and place it into the player's discard pile. This is to occur whenever instructed to do so, excluding intrigue cards, unless otherwise stated. This is typically done in order to allow the player to pay a cost in order to obtain some other effect. But if the player doesn't pay the cost, they're to discard the card and they won't obtain the associated effect. With the draw icon, the player is able to draw a card from their given deck. But if the player's deck is empty, then the player is to reshuffle their discard pile in order to form a new deck, followed by drawing a card. With the Draw an Intrigue card icon, it allows the player to draw a card from the Intrigue deck, which is to be kept face down until the player decides to play it. With that said, the player is allowed to look at their Intrigue cards whenever they like. With the Dividends icon, it allows the player to gain 5 Solari, with each opponent gaining 1 Solari. With the Dreadnought icon, it allows the player to commission 1 Dreadnought, which causes the player to take it from their supply and then to put it into their given garrison. But with that said, the player is also able to deploy their Dreadnought into the conflict if they sent one of their agents to a combat space this turn. With the Epic Game Only icon, the card is to be used only with the playing of the Epic Game mode. With the Flip icon, it will cause the tech tile to be flipped face down in order to use its given ability. At the start of the next round, the tech tile is to be flipped face up. With that said, the player can only use this icon once per round. With the Freighter icon, it gives the player one of the 2 ways to move their freighter. It will allow the player to advance their freighter 1 space up the shipping track, or to recall it to the bottom of the shipping track, collecting all of the associated rewards with the freighter's current space, along with each space found below it. With the Freeman Bond icon, it allows the player to use this effect as long as said player has one or more other Freeman cards found in play. And if two cards that have the Freeman Bond, they can activate one another, regardless of the order they were played. With the Gain Influence icon, one is associated with each faction, with these factions consisting of Emperor, Spacing Guild, Bene Gesserit, and Fremen. With the Gain 1, Gain 2, or Lose 1 influence icons, the player is able to increase their influence with one of the four factions by 1 or 2, or is to lose 1 influence. And if increasing their influence by 2, the player can't split it between two factions. Instead, it will increase the influence with one faction by 2. With the Genetic Markers icon, the associated effects aren't active until the player's research token reaches the corresponding column of their research track. Once the player reaches the first genetic marker, they can put the Tleilaxu cards they obtained during the game on top of their given deck, and this is to occur for the rest of the game. Once the player reaches the second genetic marker, the research icon is no longer able to advance their research token, causing them to draw a card instead. This too is to last for the rest of the game. With the in-play icon, with the cards that the player has played during their agent turns as well as revealing during their reveal turn, they're to remain face-up and in play until the player engages in cleanup at the end of their reveal turn, unless these cards are trashed first. With the infiltration icon, it is a special agent icon that includes a partial profile of an agent and lets the player send one of their agents to a board space that possesses an enemy agent that is already occupying it. What this means is that the player is able to send their agent to a board space that is occupied by one or more enemy agents, with said enemy agents being unable to block the player from sending their agent to the selected board space. With that said, the player can't use infiltration to send a second agent to a board space that already possesses one of their given agents. They can only send their agent to a board space that possesses enemy agents. Infiltration also doesn't negate the effects of the voice card. If the player uses the intrigue card Dispatch an Envoy in order to add icons to a given card that has an infiltration icon found on it, then the new icons that the player has added to the card doesn't allow the player to engage in infiltrate. With the influence icon, the player is able to use its associated effect, but only if the player has the required amount of influence that is indicated with the associated faction. With Lose a Troop, the troop that the player has lost is to be returned to their given supply, not their garrison. With Maker, they are connected with board spaces that possess a Maker icon that is to gain 1 bonus spice during Phase 4 as long as no agents are present upon said board space. When the player sends one of their agents to one of these board spaces, they will gain all of the bonus spice that accumulated upon the Maker icon. With the Mentat, the player is to take the Mentat from its assigned space upon the board, assuming that it's there. But with that said, the player can't take the Mentat from another player or from another space if it's been assigned there. If the player is able to claim it, then they're to place it upon their leader card, and said player can use the Mentat as one of their agents during their agent turn. And if the player takes the Mentat as a reward for a given conflict, they're to keep it as if it was an agent for the next round, and they're not to return it to the board at the end of the round that saw them obtain it from a conflict. With paying a cost, it possesses an arrow that indicates a cost that is found to the left or above the arrow, with a listed effect that is found to the right or above the arrow. If the player doesn't pay the listed cost, then the player is not to gain the listed effect, and players are never forced to pay the cost that is listed upon any given card. On top of this, players are unable to pay the listed cost more than once during any given turn, unless dealing with the Sandworm reward doubling being applied to a reward of a given conflict card. With the Mod Dib starting card, it possesses the icon that is part of the starting deck of the Mod Dib player, and with the Shaddam starting card, it possesses the icon that is part of the starting deck of the Shaddam player. With Persuasion, it is a numerical value that is printed upon a card, with the printed value varying between cards. With the Receiving of Persuasion, it is mainly gained through the reveal boxes of the player's cards. Players are able to use Persuasion in order to acquire Imperium or reserve cards, paying the listed cost found in the upper right-hand corner of the card. With that of Recall, or Recall Agent, the player is able to recall one of their agents from the game board, which is to be placed back onto their given leader card. But with that said, they can't recall the agent that was sent out on that given turn. The player is able to use it again on another agent turn during the same round. With that of Recall Spy, the player is able to return one of their spies found on an observation post found on the board back to their given supply. When it comes to that of reinforce, it sees the recruitment of 3 troops that are to be divided as the commander sees fit between their 2 allies, with any of these troops being allowed to be deployed to the given conflict. With that of research, the player is able to advance their research token 1 space to the right along their given research track. Although the player is allowed to move either of their 2 connected hexagonal spaces, some cases will only cause one of them to be advanced. On top of this, the player can never move their tokens up, down, or left along the track. With resources, they consist of Solari, Spice, and Water. When a player either gains resources or to pay a given cost, then said resources are taken from, or are returned to, the bank. With that of Solari and Spice, they are gained or paid the amount that is shown. With that of retreat, when a player retreats a given troop, said troop is to be moved from the conflict back to their given garrison. With the Rise of Ix icon, it appears on the lower right-hand corner of all cards that are found with the Rise of Ix expansion, and they are used entirely for reference purposes. With the Rival Tech Tile icon, they are only used during a solo game, and they indicate a tech tile that a rival is able to obtain. With Sandworm, it is a unit type that doesn't do anything if the current conflict is protected by the shield wall. But if the conflict isn't protected by the shield wall, then a single Sandworm can be summoned and deployed, which is to be taken from the bank and put into the player's quadrant of the conflict area. With all of that said, it is possible for the shield wall token to be removed from the game board. With the Signet Ring, when a player plays the Signet Ring card on their agent turn, said player can use their leader's Signet Ring ability. With that of Specimen, the player is able to take one of their troops from their supply and place it into the axolotl tanks found on the Bene Tleilax board. In order to pay for a card or effect that has a specimen cost, then the player is to take their troops from their axolotl tanks and return it to their given supply. With the Spy icon, it allows the player to place a spy which is taken from their supply and placed into one of the unoccupied observation posts found upon the board, although some limitation effects can be in place. But if a player doesn't have any spies found within their supply, said player will have to first recall one of their spies with no other effect occurring. With the Steel Intrigue card, each opponent who possesses 4 or more Intrigue cards will have to give the player who played the Steel Intrigue card one of them, which is to be selected at random. With the sword icon, it is to add 1 strength to the player's total strength during a given conflict. With the Take a Maker Hooks token, when triggered, it is to be taken from the bank if the player doesn't already have one, with it being placed onto their respective garrison, which indicates that they are now able to summon sandworms for a given conflict. When this given icon is used before that of a colon, it indicates a requirement that the player will have to possess the Maker Hook token found on their given garrison. When it comes to that of the team reward, each person that is found on the player's team is to gain the shown reward, which consists of 1 Solari, 1 Spice, 1 Water, or is to place a spy upon the board. With Tech Negotiation, the player is able to place a troop from their supply as a negotiator upon the Ix board. Later on, with Acquire Tech, the player is able to return any number of negotiators from Ix back to their supply as a means of decreasing the cost for the tech tile, reducing said price by 1 for every negotiator returned to the player's supply. With Tleilaxu, the player is to advance their Tleilaxu token a single space upon the Tleilaxu track, collecting any bonus that is shown on the new space that the player's token moves into. With Trade, it will have the player choose one of their teammates to trade with. With this trade, it will see each player having the option to give each other 1 or more of a single type of trade good, which includes that of Intrigue cards, Spice, Water, and Solari. With the trash of an Intrigue card, the player is to get rid of one of their Intrigue cards from their hand, with the player choosing which one they are going to trash. With Trash 1 card, the player is to get rid of 1 card from their hand, discard pile, or they have in play. When trashed, the card is to be returned to the box, and it won't be used for the remainder of the game. When it comes to that of reserve cards, they are to be returned to their respective stack in the reserve instead. With the trashing of a card, it is optional unless it pays a cost, or the card itself directs the player to trash it. With Troop, it will have the player recruit a single troop, which is to be taken from the player's supply and put into their respective garrison on the game board. And if the player recruits a troop while sending an agent to that of a combat space, then said player is able to deploy said troop into the conflict. With the Uprising icon, it appears on the lower right-hand corner of all cards that are found with the Uprising version of the game, and they are used entirely for reference purposes. With Unit, it refers to either that of a troop or a dreadnought. With Unload, it is found in the reveal box and it is triggered when any of the following situations occur: when the player engages in the reveal turn, when the player discards the given card, or when the player trashes said card. The Unload reveal boxes also work just like the other cards when used on the player's reveal turn. So if the player reveals the card, they're to ignore the Unload icon and gain its associated reveal effects as normal. The card that has an Unload reveal box also doesn't provide an option of discarding or trashing the card itself, causing it to be discarded or trashed through other means unless otherwise stated. With a victory point, when it is obtained, the player is to move their score marker a single space along the score track. But if the player loses a victory point, then the player is to move their score marker a single space back along the score track. Second, we will be looking at each of the board spaces that were listed within the rulebooks. With that said, combat spaces are labeled, which are depicted with crossed swords. When a player sends one of their agents to that of a combat space, they are able to deploy any number of troops that they recruited that turn into the given conflict, which includes any troops that were recruited by the card that the player has played. In addition to this, the player is able to deploy up to 2 additional troops that are found in their given garrison. With Arakeen, the agent icon type is that of city, it is a combat space, and the player is to recruit a troop and to draw a card. If someone controls Arakeen, they are to gain 1 Solari. With Carthag, the agent icon type is that of city, it is a combat space, and the player is to recruit a troop and to draw an intrigue card. If someone controls Carthag, they are to gain 1 Solari. With Conspire, the agent icon type is that of Emperor. It has a cost of 4 spice, and the player is to recruit 1 influence with the Emperor, as well as gaining 5 Solari, recruiting 2 troops, and are to draw an intrigue card. With Controversial Technology, the agent icon type is that of Freeman. It has a cost of 2 spice, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Fringe Worlds. They're also to draw an intrigue card, draw a card, and then trash a card. With Desert Mastery, the agent icon type is that of Fremen. It is a combat space, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Fremen, draw a card, and gain 1 spice. With Dreadnought, the agent icon is that of Landsrod. It has a cost of 3 Solari, and the player is able to commission a Dreadnought and/or acquire tech. With Economic Support, the agent icon type is that of Emperor. The player is to gain 1 influence with the Great Houses and to gain 1 spice. From there, the player is to choose 1 teammate to engage in a trade. With this trade, each player has the option to give each other 1 or more of a single type of trade good, which consists of intrigue cards, spice, water, and Solari. With Expedition, the agent icon type is that of Fremen. They're to gain 1 influence with the Fringe Worlds and then take a contract. But if there are no contracts remaining, said player is to gain 2 Solari instead. With Fold Space, the agent icon type is that of Spacing Guild, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Spacing Guild, as well as to acquire a Fold Space card from the reserve. With the Great Flat, the agent icon is that of Spice Trade. It is a combat space. It has a cost of 2 water, and the player is to gain 3 spice along with any bonus spice that has accumulated upon its respective maker icon. With Habanya Erg, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade. It is a combat space, it costs 1 water, and the player is to gain 2 spice plus any bonus spice that has accumulated upon its associated with maker icon, along with drawing a card. With Haga Basic, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade. It is a combat space. It has a cost of 1 water, and the player is to gain 2 spice plus any bonus spice that has been accumulated upon its respective maker icon. With Hall of Oratory, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod, and the player is to recruit 1 troop. And during the player's reveal turn, said player is to gain 1 persuasion if they have an agent upon the building space. With Hardy Warriors, the agent icon type is that of Freeman. It is a combat space. It has a cost of 1 water. The player is to gain 1 influence with the Freeman, and they are to recruit 2 troops. With Highliner, the agent icon type is that of Spacing Guild. It is a combat space. It has a cost of 6 spice, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Spacing Guild, recruit 5 troops, and is to obtain 2 water. With High Council, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod. It has a cost of 5 Solari, and the player is able to send an agent here only once per game. The player is to place their counselor token upon an unoccupied council seat, which is found to the right of the space. For the rest of the game, the player is to gain 2 persuasion during each of their reveal turns. With Imperial Basin, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade. It is a combat space, and the player is to gain 1 spice plus any bonus spice that has been accumulated upon its respective maker icon. If someone controls Imperial Basin, they are to gain 1 spice. With interstellar shipping, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade. The player will have to possess 2 or more influence with the Spacing Guild, and the player is able to move their freighter twice upon its respective track. With military support, the agent icon type is that of Emperor. It has a cost of 2 spice. The commander is to gain 1 influence with the Great Houses, and then they're to recruit 3 troops that they're to divide between their allies as they see fit. These troops also have the option of being deployed into the current conflict as well. With Mentat, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod. It has a cost of 2 Solari, and the player is to draw a card. If the Mentat is found on said space, said player is to claim the Mentat and place it on their leader card. For the duration of this round, the player is able to use the Mentat as one of their agents in order to use during the agent turn. Once Phase 5 is reached, the Mentat is to be returned to this space. With Rally Troops, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod. It has a cost of 4 Solari, and the player is to recruit 4 troops. With Research Station, the agent icon type is that of City. It is a combat space, it costs 2 water, and the player is to draw 3 cards. With a Research Station overlay, the player is to also obtain research as well. With Secrets, the agent icon type is that of Bene Gesserit, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Bene Gesserit. Draw an Intrigue card, and if any opponent possesses 4 or more Intrigue cards, they will have to give this player one of them, which is to be selected at random. With Secure Contract, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade, and the player is to gain 3 Solari. With Selective Breeding, the agent icon type is that of Bene Gesserit. It has a cost of 2 spice, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Bene Gesserit, as well as to trash 1 card in order to draw 2 cards. With Cell Melange, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade. It has a cost of 2 to 5 spice, and the player is to gain the amount of Solari that is shown based upon the cost that they paid. The player is also unable to engage in multiple exchanges in a single turn when doing this. With CH Tauber, the agent icon type is that of City. It is a combat space. The player will have to possess 2 or more influence with the Fremen, and the player is to recruit a troop and to gain 1 water. With Smuggling, the agent icon type is that of Spice Trade, and the player is to gain 1 Solari and to move their freighter. With Still Suits, the agent icon type is that of Fremen. It is a combat space, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Fremen, as well as to gain 1 water. With Swordmaster, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod. It costs 8 Solari, and the player can send one of their agents here only once per game. While there, the player is to gain a Swordmaster, which is the player's 3rd agent, and this agent is to be placed upon the player's leader card. For the rest of the game, which includes the round that the Swordmaster is obtained, the player is to possess 3 agents. But in a 6-player game, the Swordmaster space costs 8 Solari if the player doesn't have their Swordmaster. But if they do have their Swordmaster, it'll cost 6 Solari. Once they gain their Swordmaster, the player is to use it only once during the game, with the player placing the Swordmaster bonus token upon the board. For the remainder of the game, during each reveal turn a player engages in, they are to gain 2 strength. With the Tech Negotiation, the agent icon type is that of Landsrod, and the player is to either acquire tech at a 1 spice tech discount or to send a negotiator to the Ix board. In addition to this, during the player's reveal turn, the player is to gain 1 persuasion if they have an agent at this board space. With Vast Wealth, the agent icon type is that of Emperor, and the player is to gain 1 influence with the Emperor along with obtaining 3 Solari. And with Wealth, the agent icon type is that of Emperor. The player is to gain 1 influence with the Emperor, and they're to gain 2 Solari. And third, let's take a look at clarifications. With that of Appropriate, players aren't allowed to mix Solari and Spice as a means of paying the cost for a tech tile. With that said, the player is able to return negotiators from Ix in order to reduce said cost by 1 Solari each. With Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, in order to use the Masterstroke ability, the player will need to choose 2 of the 4 Baron Harkonnen tokens and place them onto their leader with the faction side being placed face down. From there, the other 2 tokens are to be placed into the box without letting the other players see them. Later, said player is to reveal with choices as described in order for them to obtain their reward. With the Bindu Suspension, this intrigue card can be played at the start of the player's agent turn before they do anything else. Once doing so, they draw a card followed by their turn immediately ending. With calculated hire, this intrigue card is only able to be used to take the Mentat from its starting position in the Lands Rod. With Clandestine Meeting, in order to play this card, it is done on the agent turn along with the player having to add at least one agent icon to it somehow, such as grafting it. With Court Intrigue, Sonic Snoopers, when the player places a card at the bottom of the Intrigue deck, they're not to reveal the card to their opponents. With Demand Respect, the player wins a conflict that gives the player spice at its reward. Said player is to take said spice before they use said spice to play this given intrigue card. The player can also play to the victor in order to gain the spice, followed by playing Demand Respect. When it comes to that of Dispatch an Envoy, it allows the player to play 2 cards grafted together in order to send an agent with the player choosing which card is to gain the agent icons. When it comes to that of Fide Routha Harkonnen, during setup, the Fide token is to be placed on the leftmost space of the training track that is printed upon the leader card. When said token reaches the rightmost space, it is to remain there for the remainder of the game. With Gola, if it gets grafted with power play in order to send an agent to a faction board space, then said player is to only gain 2 influence with said faction, which is the same as if the player only played power play. Gola is to copy the entire agent box found on the card that it's grafted, which includes the Trash This Card effect. If Gola is grafted to that of a Bene Gesserit card that has an effect that checks if you have a Bene Gesserit card in play, then the Gola's version of the effect will count said Bene Gesserit card as being in play. But with that said, Gola is unable to counted by other cards that are on the lookout for a Bene Gesserit card due to it not actually being a Bene Gesserit card, the beauty of technicalities. And if the player grafts Gola to Weirding Way, they are able to take 2 extra turns in a row, which seems pretty nice. When it comes to that of Elisa Ikaz, if the player grafts a card to one of the cards that they set aside using this leader, said player is to receive 1 spice or 1 Solari, depending upon the icons that are found on the card that the player set aside. This occurs even if the player sent their agent to a board space that is allowed by the other grafted card. But if the player decides to take a reveal turn on their first turn of a round, they still get to add the card that they set aside to their revealed cards. But Elisa Ikaz won't give said player 1 spice or 1 Solari. With the Imperial Basher, the reveal box will only count other cards that will actually provide swords for that given turn. So basically speaking, only cards with swords on them will count in this situation. With Kwisatz Haderach, it replaces the normal rules when it comes to sending an agent to a board space, for it allows the player to play this card in order to perform an agent turn, even if said player doesn't have any agents left in their supply. This allows the player to send an agent that is already found upon the board, including the board space that it was just occupying. When it comes to that of a board space that can only be used once per game, such as the High Council or Swordmaster, then the player won't be able to use Kwisatz Haderach in order to send an agent to said space more than once. The player also can't overcome the voice and send one of their agents to a board space that they can't send an agent to. If the player moves their agent away from a space that possesses a maker icon and said space remains empty until phase 4, then a bonus spice is to accumulate there. Even if Kwisatz Haderach is grafted to another card, the player can still only send 1 agent out that turn. Even the use of Gola won't allow the player to send a second agent during a single turn. With that of Lady Jessica, it allows the player to start the game with the Lady Jessica side face up, not the Reverend Mother Jessica side. With Lady Margot Fenring, Princess Irulan, the player can reach 2 influence, even if they already moved past 2 while gaining multiple influence during the same turn. Said player can reach 2 influence with the same faction multiple times during the same game. This is done by losing influence and later regaining it, although the player can only reach 2 influence when they are moving up the influence track, not down it. With Paul Atreides / Poison Snooper, the player isn't allowed to look at the top card of their deck if their deck is empty. The player isn't allowed to reshuffle their discard pile in order to form a new deck until they need to draw a new card, so said player will have to wait to reshuffle their discard pile. With Second Wave, just like that of all combat intrigue cards, the player must already have a unit found in a conflict before they are able to play this given card. With that of Shaddam Carino IV, when the player uses his Signet Ring ability in order to send an agent to a board space, then the Emperor of the Known Universe restriction, when it comes to the deployment of units to a given conflict, is to take immediate effect. When it comes to the Spaceport Tech tile, it allows the player to put Tleilaxu cards they acquire atop of their deck, even if said player's research token hasn't reached the first genetic marker. With Spacing Guild's favor, it is to be moved from in play to the player's discard pile during the cleanup phase without its discard ability being triggered. It's only when it gets discarded from the player's hand that its ability will be triggered. With Test of Humanity, the opposing players are to make their choices, starting with the opponent found to the player's left and moving in a clockwise direction. Each opponent is to decide what they are to do, but if their hand is empty, then they can't discard. And if they don't have any troops deployed in a conflict, they can't lose any. When it comes to discarding a card from their hand, an opponent is to choose which one to discard, not to discard it randomly. With the voice, the player is to use one of their available control markers in order to mark the board space of their choice, followed by removing it on their next turn. The voice will only stop opponents from sending their agents to that given board space for a single turn. This will prevent Kwisatz Haderach from sending an agent to the board space that the player has chosen. With Treachery, unlike that of most other cards that has the unload icon, this card's agent box specifies that it trashes itself, thus triggering the unload reveal box. With Usurp, it allows the player to graft this card to another card found in the player's hand instead of grafting it to a card that is found on Imperium row. A grafted card that is found in the Imperium row isn't considered to be in play. Trashing a card that is grafted with Usurp will trigger effects like that of Replacement Eyes and cards with Unload. With all of that said, the latest rules and clarifications for this game can be found on the Frequently Asked Questions document found at http://www.duneimperium.com/FAQ. And with that said, this will bookend the main series pertaining to how to go about playing the game, Dune Imperium. We hope that you found this to be helpful and allowed you to better understand how to go about playing the game. As time progresses and any updates get put out for the community, we will return to these episodes and update them accordingly to better reflect the changes that have been made to the game. With the nature of Checkpoint Gaming, we want to present the most up-to-date version of the game as possible to those who wish to play. So with that said, we hope you enjoyed our series pertaining to how to go about playing Dune Imperium.